And now we have a wonderful story. And it's interesting, if you start reading about or studying these Marian apparitions, there's always more. And year after year, it seems like each year I find out just a little bit more. And it's such a fascinating story. We could go on all night, but I'll try to make this fairly brief. So we can begin many decades before Our Lady ever appeared, and we can relate this in some ways to other apparitions. So for instance, at Fatima in Portugal, an angel appeared to the children a year before Our Lady appeared. That angel appeared twice to them and taught them some prayers. In 1916, the following year in 1917, Our Lady appeared. Well, a similar thing happened here, in that an angel appeared to a king of a neighboring kingdom of Texcoco. No, I might be pronouncing that wrong, but just excuse me for that. But an angel appeared actually to the servant of the king and announced to the servant of the king that he was an angel of the true invisible God, the creator of heaven and earth. And he had a message for the king. Well, so the king found out then about this invisible God who is the creator of heaven and earth, all powerful. And so he built a temple to this God. And the temple was empty, and nothing was done in there. But no human sacrifice was offered in there, which was being offered in all the other temples. And as an example, in 1487, an immense new pyramid temple was built and dedicated in the center of Tenochtitlan, which was later named Mexico City. And this temple was 5 stories high, as we would consider it, with 114 steps to the top. Now, the architect of the Aztec Empire was a man named Tlalcalel, and he developed and carried out a plan for cementing that empire by a regular tribute of victims of human sacrifice, and by requiring that all Mexican nobility attend the great sacrifices, and that all Mexican warriors take prisoners deliberately for sacrifice. Now, reliable evidence indicates that it took only 15 seconds to kill each victim. And for the dedication of this temple, more than 80,000 men were killed. It went on for 4 days and 4 nights. And Tlalcalel had commanded all the high nobility of Mexico to be present, and they sat watching from scented rose-covered boxes. But eventually, the bonds of custom and even of fear were burst by overwhelming horror, and most of the spectators fled, along with many of the people of the city. And even those who could hide from the sight of what was happening were no longer able to endure the stench. That was in 1487. Well, in 1505, Montezuma II ascended the throne of the Aztec Empire, the capital of which was at Mexico City. And we have another apparition of an angel, because his sister, the princess Papansin, she governed the people of a nearby city. And in 1509, she died and was buried in a cave in her garden. But after she was placed in the tomb, she had an incredible experience, and she found herself standing on the shore of a great sea. In her mind was the compulsion to reach the other side of the sea. But when she was about to leap in, a beautiful young man with wings of exquisitely colored feathers, and you can see something like that on the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, a beautiful young man with wings of exquisitely colored feathers and attired in a long snow-white robe stepped in front of her, and on his forehead he had a sign, a cross. And the young man spoke to her, and he said, "Stop. It is not yet time for you to cross this water. Do not fear. I have been sent by the true invisible God to give you a message. He loves you although you do not know him." And while the angel was speaking, he showed her an image of a number of galleons sailing on the water. And the men in these ships were not Indians. They had white skin, and they were wearing helmets, and one of them had a golden helmet. They were holding banners on which she saw the same sign as the angel had on his forehead, a cross. Now you'll notice, if you look closely on the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, that she's wearing a brooch up near her neck, a golden brooch with a cross on it. And all of these things have significance because they're all foretold in these prophecies, these apparitions of an angel. So what happened was then the angel told her that the men who she was being shown in this image were from the other side of this great water, and that they would conquer the land and bring the knowledge of the true God, the creator of heaven and earth. So again, we have that same title, the true invisible God, the true God, creator of heaven and earth. And then he said, "Take this message to your brother. God wants you to live so that when the great change has taken place and peace is again established in this land, you, Papansen, will be the first to receive the water that heals and washes away sin. Guide the inhabitants of this land to do likewise." And it's true, because she was the first to be baptized and given the name Doña Maria Papansen, the name of a noblewoman, of a princess. She was baptized along with Saint Juan Diego and his wife and uncle. Well, when the vision had faded away, she became conscious and she found herself in this tomb. And she was not able to get out, but she shouted and shouted, and in the morning the servants came and found her and released her. So she told her brother about this, Montezuma, and he had her make some drawings of the vision. And then the court artists made copies of this and distributed it all along the coastline, and the emperor said to notify him as soon as such ships made their appearance. And it was 10 years later that the same ships made the appearance, and one of the men on the boat had a golden helmet, just like she had seen in the vision. So Hernan Cortez, headed an expedition to Mexico, and they landed on Good Friday, April 22nd, 1519, and the governor from there in Mexico greeted them and told Cortez that he wished to send the helmet to the emperor. And when the emperor saw the helmet, he recalled the vision, and he proceeded very cautiously. Now, there was a serpent god named Quetzalcoatl, and this was the primary god worshipped by all of Mexico and possibly by all of Mesoamerica. Now, this serpent god had originated with this comet from a long time before. 1,450 years before Christ, there was a comet that appeared in the night sky, or in the sky, and this comet was identified with a serpent god. As it raced across the sky, it looked like a serpent. Now, this serpent is shown by the crescent moon that Our Lady is standing on in the image that she showed Saint Juan Diego. And it was seen that because it was black, that it was the comet, and that it was dead, it was expired. So this serpent god did not actually want human sacrifice, but there was another god that did. And so the serpent god basically just tolerated it, but there was a prophecy that someday the serpent god would return and he would demand that human sacrifice be done away with. And so it just so happened that there was a particular date and a particular year that it was said that this serpent god would return. It dated his name year one reed, which reoccurred only once every 52 years, and in the Mexican calendar, the year 1519 of the Christian era was a one-reed year. And Good Friday, April 22nd, was the very day that was prophesied that this God would return. Now, it just so happened that Hernan Cortez was dressed in a way that looked like the way this serpent god would be dressed. He was dressed all in black because it was Good Friday. So, Montezuma took all this in mind, and he followed every step of Cortez's progress. Now, what helped Cortez was that Montezuma believed in the prophecy that had been given. He believed that this true God had sent, or that he believed that Cortez came to put an end to human sacrifice. And also, it helped quite a bit that all of the other tribes in Mexico were afraid of the Aztecs because they were the tribes that the sacrifices were taken from. And they wanted freedom from the Aztecs. And Cortez offered them freedom from the Aztecs and an end to human sacrifice. So all of these other tribes teamed up with Cortez to overthrow the Aztec Empire. And they did. But also that Montezuma was willing to hand it over. So when the Spaniards arrived in Mexico in 1519, 20,000 humans were sacrificed each year by the Aztec nation alone, not to mention the other nations and tribes that were there. So Cortez begged Montezuma to cease offering human sacrifice, and he and Cortez and his soldiers went into the temple area, and they found the walls coated with human blood. And they cleaned up one of the rooms, scraping human blood off the walls and pavements where it had dried, and they constructed an altar, and they placed a crucifix and a small statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary upon it. But this enraged the Aztecs, and they determined to exterminate the Spaniards. Now Montezuma, however, warned Cortez that he must take his men and escape in order to save their lives. So you had the Aztecs against Cortez, and you had Montezuma helping him, and the other tribes helping him. Well, in time, then, the empire was overthrown, and more Spanish came. And then the Franciscans came. There were a group of 12 Franciscans who showed up, and by then Cortez and his men and some of the Aztecs who had been converted came to greet these Franciscan missionaries. Well, they all dressed in their finest clothes, beautiful colors, and came to greet these Franciscan missionaries who showed up in rags, absolutely just, destitute, emaciated, barefoot, with long beards, and Aztec and the Spaniards got down on their knees and kissed the hem of their garments, and it just seemed like to the Indians how strange that they came dressed in their finery, and this is what they're venerating. But somehow or other, these men must be very holy. Well, the missionaries did not have much luck in converting the natives. And really, there were just a few that were converted: the princess, St. Juan Diego and his wife and uncle, and others. And so the church was established there, but it was very small. Well, then we come to a point where there's been a group of men sent by the King of Spain to govern the land, and they are bad men. They're abusing the Indians. They are in it for power and wealth. And then you have the bishop, who came on the same boat that they did, and the bishop's a good man. But he's trying to tell the king back in Spain that these men are terrible and that the king needs to do something about them. But the men know that the bishop is against them, because the bishop tries to send a letter to the king and they intercept the letter, and so they determine they're gonna get rid of the bishop, and they're not gonna let his letters go to the king. So the bishop gets one of the natives to make a cross that's hollow, and he hides the letter in the cross and sends it to the king. And the king then replaces these men. He gets rid of these bad men and he replaces them with some good men. But all of this has scandalized the Mexicans, and so they are not trusting. Well, the bishop has to go back to Spain soon to be consecrated a bishop. He's been named a bishop, but he has to go back to be consecrated. And he's feeling like all is lost, that really this is he's a failure and this is not going to work, and he really wants to try to convince the king that he shouldn't be sent back there. But he prays to the Blessed Virgin Mary for a sign. And a man shows up at his door saying, "The Blessed Virgin Mary sent me to you. She wants a temple built on this hill over there." And the bishop wants to believe that this is the answer to his prayer. But he's cautious and he sends the man away. Now that's from the point of view of the bishop. That's the part that we don't often hear. We often hear the part of St. Juan Diego, and he is the man who came to the bishop. So, now this is, St. Juan Diego then was a native Mexican, and he was of the middle class. He owned land, and he had been educated, but he lived very humbly. His wife had died. He had been baptized just 2 years after the first Franciscans had landed. And now he was on a 9-mile walk to attend Mass on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception in the year 1531. He was 57 years old. That's the same age I am, 57 years old. So he's walking the 9-mile walk to attend Mass, and as he passed Tepeyac Hill, a blanket of warmth and peace overtook him. He could hear the sound of angelic voices singing above him, coming from the top of the hill, and he was overcome by this angelic melody. And after a short while there was silence again, and then one single voice rang out to him like a bell. "Little Juan Dieguito." And he darted up the hill as quickly as his legs could carry him. The sight he beheld filled his heart with such joy he thought it would burst. But the dazzling beauty of what he saw made him freeze on the spot. He couldn't catch his breath. And she spoke. "Be it known and understood by you, the smallest of my children, that I am the ever-Virgin Mary, Mother of the true God, the Lord of heaven and earth." Again, that same title that was given by both of the angelic visions. "I ardently desire that a temple be built for me here, where I can show and offer all my love, compassion, help, and protection, for I am your merciful mother. And in order to carry out what my mercy seeks, you must go to the bishop's palace in Mexico and tell him that I sent you to make it clear how very much I desire that he build a temple for me here on this place." And so Juan visited the bishop, not knowing that the bishop was already asking for a sign. And the bishop was cautious, but he was kind, and he invited Juan to come back again and tell him the rest of the details. And so Juan returned the very next day, and the bishop was not so kind this time. But while listening to Juan, His Excellency was in awe. How could this simple man, a new Catholic, have such a profound knowledge of Our Lady if this story were not true? And so the bishop asked Juan many questions about the apparition, and then he sent Juan away asking for a sign. He had asked Our Lady for a sign. Juan was a sign, but now he wanted Juan to bring him a sign. And he also sent a couple of servants to follow Juan and to spy on him. Now it was 2 days later that Juan, after having tried to avoid Our Lady, was greeted by her and given the sign. She gave him roses in wintertime and instructed him to hold them in his tilma, his mantle, his poncho, and not to show them to anyone until he presented them to the bishop. And so he took them all wrapped up and hided them and went to visit the bishop. And when he got there, the guard refused him entry. And the servants wanted him to show them what was inside. What was he hiding? They harassed him, and he finally showed them just one rose. They were surprised to see a rose, and they grabbed at it, and it disappeared and turned into a painting on the tilma. Now finally, their curiosity got the best of them, and they ran to tell the bishop, who invited Juan to enter his residence. And Juan told His Excellency all about the roses and knelt before him, opening to the tilma, and he said, "Receive them." But he didn't know, and he didn't see what was happening. And the bishop did not look at the roses. He looked at Juan's chest, and his expression changed from surprise to awe to reverence. He fell to his knees before Juan and shed tears. And Juan looked down at his chest, and he saw an image being painted as he watched by angels. So the image wasn't there when he opened it up. They watched it being painted after he opened it up and presented the roses. Now, Our Lady had said that this image would bring about conversion. She didn't say that she would bring about conversion. She said the image would bring about conversion. And it did. It brought about the conversion of 8 to 9 million conversions among the people of Mexico within the next 10 years. There are all sorts of symbols in this image. And again, we could just go on and on. But a couple things to note. The stars that are on the mantle are such that they match the night sky in reverse on December 12th, 1531. They match the positions of the constellations in reverse, as though looking from heaven toward earth. Also, the flowers and designs that are on the gown itself are identified with various things, but among them there are these large flowers that are in the positions of the various volcanoes in Mexico. The same number of volcanoes in the same positions if you line them up on a map. Let's see, what else? That's all I can think of right now. But there are all sorts of things that scientists continue to study and to find. One of the things that happened, I think, in the 1950s is by the use of photography and blowing things up, or making things, zooming in, not blowing them up, but zooming in, they found in her eyes, in the pupils of her eyes, some images. And in studying them, they realized that they were looking at the bishop and his servants and Saint Juan Diego there through her eyes. They saw the scene of the people that were in the room when the image was being painted. All sorts of fascinating things for us to learn and to study through this very image. The image then is not painted with a type of paint that we could identify, and it's not in the fibers, it's floating above the cactus fiber. The painting itself is it's not sitting upon it, it's not in it, it's just floating above it. And yet, this cactus fiber garment, which should have disintegrated 50 years after it was made, has lasted for now 500 years. Another amazing thing about this image. So when we consider any sort of holy image, any sort of icon, especially a blessed icon, it is a sacramental, it is something that helps us. We should all have holy images in our homes. We should all have holy images in our homes and crucifix in our homes. But there are certain images that have, I guess, a particular grace given. And this particular image is given for the grace of conversion. So, what is next? Well, I guess that's always the question. I've been praying for years for the conversion of this parish. And I do believe that Our Lady has answered my prayers in a way that I didn't expect when Father Kluge arrived a couple months ago and told me that I should start up the Legion of Mary here in the parish. And it sounded good to me. I'd had some experience with the Legion of Mary in past years as a seminarian, as a new priest. Hadn't gotten really involved, but I had a positive experience. But now I know that that was the answer to my prayer, because the members of the Legion of Mary are going out door to door to our neighbors. They've gone several blocks out now, and they've met all sorts of nice people, even who've invited them in for coffee or what have you. They've had good conversations with kind and nice people who like this parish, even who are not Catholic, who like this parish, who like what we're doing, who are interested in coming. Now, whether they come and become Catholics, I don't know. But this is where it starts. And I know this is an answer to my many years of praying novenas and asking for the conversion of this parish. I know that's the answer. And I'm thankful to God for that. Our Lady knows what we need, even when we don't know. And this is why I say when you pray and you ask God for something, you don't know how He's going to answer. And sometimes it might seem like He hasn't answered your prayer when really He has. And you have to wait and see how things are going to play out. You even have to wait 20 years sometimes, or 30 years. I personally only have experience waiting 23 years for an answer to a prayer, but I'm sure that there are prayers that take longer than that. And maybe some of you can tell me about your own experiences. Well, this is a great opportunity to celebrate a wonderful mystery of God and a manifestation of His grace and His gifts and His consolation and the blessing of the Blessed Virgin Mary and how she brings people to her Son. So let us give thanks to God for her, and as we're preparing for Christmas, this is just a very joyous time. And I thank all of you for being here. And as I said, this Mass is offered for all the intentions of those who've been praying the novena, not only those who have prayed with us, but all those who are praying the novena to Our Lady of Guadalupe all over the world. Let us entrust our intentions to her, and now we'll continue this Mass.